I'll come back to some more Umineko when they cry. Well, I'd say the summoned off from the last part. Things were, I mean, the dialogue seemed to be pretty normal. Just the normal conversations and the such. You know, surprisingly, Jessica and Natsuki and they were not, like being assholes to each other and such. And you know, things go on. Except the only thing interesting was George and Shannon. Apparently, they seem to have an interest in each other, and George apparently gave Shannon the wedding. It was supposedly like a ring. It's just supposed it's a wedding ring, But apparently, it's not a request; it's an order. Well, well then, who knows? We'll find out on tomorrow what George would say. Anyway, let's continue reading. Shannon entered the entrance hall to the mansion with a tottering gait. A mixture of exultation and uncertainty gave her a feeling that she couldn't easily describe. It swelled up in her chest until it felt like she was about to burst. After stopping for a second in front of the servant room to take a deep breath and calm her heart, she opened the door. Inside, Golda, who had been ordered to take the midnight shift at the mansion tonight, was absorbed in a worn-out crossword puzzle magazine. He looked up for an instant to see if one of the family had come, but when he realized it was a fellow servant, he returned to his puzzle as if nothing had happened.
源氏様より郷田さんのお手伝いにつくように言われてまいりました。
ああ、そうですか。それは助かります。そろそろ戸締まりの見回りに行きたかったのですが、ここを開けてもいいものか困っていたのです。何しろ、旦那様方の会合はまだだいぶ続きそうですからね。
I'm not surprised.
いつ何時お茶のご用命があるかもわかりませんし。
Oh no.
そうですよね。ではどうしましょうか。私が留守番を。
ではシャノンさん、申し訳ありませんが、お屋敷内の見回りをお願いします。私はここで親族の皆さんのご用命の待機をしておりますので。
はい。
Shannon was slightly disgusted. Even though she'd come here to help out as a favor, she was casually being forced to do the job of the person actually on duty. Furthermore, after one-sidedly forcing that task on her, Golda returned to his magazine once again and became immersed in his crossword puzzle. Shannon bowed her head as a token sign of respect for her elder, then left the room to patrol the mansion. Thanks to her being a bit ticked off, she managed to suppress that floaty feeling she'd been having until just now. And anyway, she couldn't let Genji or Kanon see her looking like this. She wanted a little time to herself until her heart calmed down, so maybe going on patrol wouldn't be so bad. Patrol. She began to hear the tumultuous, 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 whatever you call it, voices of the family discussion coming from the dining hall. Someone was speaking at great length, only to be interrupted by someone else. This second person also began to speak in a very long, drawn-out fashion, until yet another person interrupted. That kept on repeating. It was as though their displeasure was seeping out through their voices. It just goes in an entire loop. Oh man, through their voices. She had been told to go to the guest house, so it would be bad if Kraus discovered her. Thinking this, Shannon dashed past the dining hall. Then she went along a prearranged route through the dark mansion, checking that all the locks were secure. She walked down the hall, checking each window. There were no humans on Rokujima other than those connected to the family, so locking up didn't really serve much of a purpose. I mean, it's a remote island, so it's not like there's any intruders. There's not anyone gonna like find where they live. Serve much of a purpose. No one had been in the habit of locking up at the Ushiromiya head family, at least not until Natsuki had scolded them for being careless. The metal fixtures on the windows were ice cold, and as she checked them one by one, the glow in her heart seemed to cool down. Whoa, a little butterfly flew by. I wonder if this is a sign. At that time, she thought she saw something twinkling across the hall. Twinkling? How could anything be twinkling through the darkness of the hall? She figured she must have been imagining it, but she still held her breath. Grasping the curtain, she fearfully gazed down the hall. However, other than the occasional crack of thunder brightening the hallway, she was unable to glimpse any flicker again. It must have been her imagination after all. Maybe her heart was so agitated that that she'd seen something that didn't even exist. Shannon went back to checking the windows. However, a certain unnerving memory was resurrected in the back of her mind. It was that ghost story, which had been passed down amongst the servants who served the Ushiromiya head family. The mansion had two different masters, one of the day and one of the night. Beatrice, the master of the night, would sometimes fly around the mansion in the form of sparkling butterflies. That was the story. Come to think of it, didn't Canon-kun once say he'd seen it with his own eyes? So he got sulky when I said he must have imagined it and refused to believe him. Could it possibly be true? The roar of the thunder gave no answer. Hmm. Peaceful rain, it seems. Oh, a lit hallway. I am a bit concerned. The bell. I don't even know what's going to happen from here. Oh, hmm. Things been going on during the night. Hmm. Time rolls on by. Wow, we went out like several hours. The second day, October 5th, 1986. The sacrifice is chosen by the key. Ooh. Oh, yes. 10 minutes in. Genji tightened his bow tie and looked outside through a crack in the curtains. Maybe the rain had died down a tiny bit since the previous night, but the thick rain clouds didn't seem like they'd be letting any trace of the morning sun get by. The morning was dim and far from refreshing.
やはり今日いっぱいはやみそうにないか。
No, well, no shit. I'm pretty sure George already said it earlier on the last part or so.
お待たせしました、源氏様。
Canon finished checking his appearance and exited the washroom. On their normal schedule, it was rare for anyone to have to suffer going straight from a midnight shift to an early morning shift. They were on a special schedule for the 2 days at the family conference. However, unless the typhoon passed today, the relatives' stay on this island would last until tomorrow. Canon thought it best to be prepared for the special schedule to last an extra day. The two of them left the guest house, opening their umbrellas. The rose garden had been devastated by the wind and rain on the previous night. Even though they'd spent several days making it beautiful to welcome guests, one stormy night was enough to ruin it. Well, that's unfortunate. Canon sighed. The two headed for the mansion. They were supposed to meet up with Goda and prepare breakfast. Goda was such a perfectionist that he had probably already woken up and was probably already preparing a breakfast as exquisite and elegant as glasswork. They reached the overhang by the entrance to the mansion and folded up their umbrellas. Genji took a bundle of several keys from his pocket and unlocked the front door. The Ushiromiya family mansion was the only thing on Rokujima, so in the past, they hadn't been in the habit of locking up. However, Natsuki had ordered that the mansion be locked up from midnight to early morning. Ever since then, unlocking the door in the early morning had become part of the servants' morning shift. This task had been given to Genji and Kanon, so that Goda could start preparing breakfast as soon as he woke up. Silence had fallen in the mansion, giving the impression that the mansion itself was still asleep.
では朝の仕事を始めよう。
はい。
The two of them split up and began opening the curtains throughout the mansion. If the curtains stayed closed, the mansion would remain enveloped in faint darkness, as though it was still trapped in the previous night. Oh, look at that, lively as ever. Following a well-rehearsed procedure, Canon went around the mansion, opening the curtains for one window after another without having to retrace his steps once. Even with this horrible weather, drawing the curtains made it feel just a little bit like morning. While doing that, he passed in front of the kitchen. Even though he hadn't smelled anything yet, his stomach started aching for some of Goda's prized cooking.
おはようございます。
Oh, interesting background. I don't think I've seen the kitchen background yet, so there's that. He tried to greet Goda, who should have been getting breakfast ready, but Goda was nowhere to be seen. The kitchen was darkly lit, and not only were the curtains not open, but the fan wasn't even running. It was still cold, without any trace of a fire being lit, so of course there were no signs of breakfast being made either. Though it would have been inexcusable, perhaps Goda had overslept. Even servants are only human. They sometimes sleep in and show up late. In the rare case that such a thing happens, It's part of a servant's code to hide the unsightly scene before anyone notices, smoothly cover it up, and make sure the family never even realizes that anything has gone wrong. Cannon took the receiver of the phone that had been fitted onto the wall and dialed the number for the extension line in the servant's sleeping room. He couldn't hear that characteristic sound of a dial tone. Cannon tried picking up the receiver again, but even so, he couldn't hear the usual dial tone. He tried dialing again, but it had no apparent effect. Could the lightning last night have damaged some machine, breaking the extension line? The equipment in his mansion was all worn out. Cannon fully understood that even the smallest thing could have caused it to break down. Such a shame. Seems we're not getting breakfast this time. He gave up trying to wake Goda with the phone and dashed over to the servant's sleeping room. How long has it been since I stopped sleeping and started lazily staring up at the ceiling? That vague sense of awakening was part of Natsuki's usual morning experience. She always slept lightly, and she couldn't sleep at all without medicine. To Natsuki, sleep was definitely not a happy thing. When she looked outside, she saw that it was still pouring. If she hadn't sensed a tiny amount of light, she might have mistakenly thought that it was still the previous night. She herself was one of the hosts, so, so she mustn't wake up later than her guests. Urging herself on, she raised up her body, which still hadn't completely recovered from yesterday's weariness. No one would torment her as long as she remained inside this room, and her headache wouldn't get any worse here. This room was the only place she could find peace. So when she left, it meant returning to the world where her husband's siblings kept trying to stab each other in the back. In that case, wouldn't it be better to just stay locked up in this room forever? That ridiculous notion brought a bitter smile to Natsuki's face. She was starting to sound like Kinzo, though she often complained about Kinzo staying locked up in his own room and refusing to attend to everyone else. The truth was that she longed to do the same. Natsuki gave her head a small shake, and her fantasy was replaced by the reawakening of her usual headache. When she reached for the doorknob, trying to leave the room, her hand touched the scorpion charm that she had hung from it before going to sleep the previous night. It was Maria's charm, which Natsuki had received from Jessica. Didn't Jessica say something about it having the power to repel magic, telling her to hang it from her doorknob? Maybe it was thanks to the charm that at least this room had been protected from the malice of her husband's siblings. As she thought this, her mood began to get a little more cheerful.
ジェシカのおかげで少しはゆっくり眠れたということかしら。
Then Natsuki remembered. That's right. Last night I promised Jessica that I'd give her a charm of my own in exchange for this one, didn't I? Natsuki opened a drawer on her dresser and took out an antique accessory case that she had treasured when she was a child. Inside, there were many small objects that Natsuki had thought were valuable at the time. From amidst those, she pulled out a red pouch. Inside was a small round mirror, about 10 centimeters across. It looked quite old, but the design on the back of the mirror was very ornate, and it felt like something of historical value. At the very least, it seemed much more authentic than the other charm, which looked like a plastic scorpion keychain. She had heard that this was a spiritual mirror for warding off evil spirits, and she had been given it especially by her grandmother when her grandfather's mementos had been distributed. It had been believed since long ago that a strange power resided in this mirror. Perhaps people thought it could reflect calamity and malice in the same way it reflected light. Natsuki returned the mirror to its pouch. It would probably be a fitting object to hand over to Jessica. Just as she was placing it in her pocket, the sound of someone knocking on the door suddenly echoed throughout the room.
はい。
Excuse me.
おはようございます、奥様。源氏でございます。早朝から申し訳ございません。
Excuse me.
今行きます。何事ですか？
Genji. No servant had ever come to her this early in the morning, nor had they come to wake her in person. Perhaps something bad had happened. I'm curious to know. Maybe some fatal oversight had been made while preparing breakfast. Something that would shame the household in front of their guests. Natsuki took a deep breath in anticipation for whatever trouble she was about to hear of. When she opened the door, Genji once again gave a morning greeting, while bowing deeply. Natsuki tentatively responded,
おはようございます。何かありましたか？
申し訳ございません。昨夜の落雷で電話機器に故障が出たようです。
Shit, man.
内線電話が不通になっておりますもので、直接のお伺いになってしまったことをお許しください。
内線電話が普通？それは面倒になりましたね。修理は可能ですか？
残念ながら故障箇所が分かりません。
What?
後で業者を呼んで修理させたいと思います。
ということは、この台風が過ぎるまでは修理不能ということですか？つまり、客人たちの滞在中はずっと普通ということですね。客人たちのお世話に支障は？
出ないよう最善を尽くします。
結構です。粗相のないようよろしく頼みます。
Natsuki let out a small sigh of relief. She had been prepared for the worst, but damage to the telephones wasn't the kind of trouble she was worried about. Then again, even this would probably be enough to spark sarcasm from Eva. Natsuki gave her head a light shake.
朝食の準備は順調ですか？
それがゴーダの姿が見えません。
Yeah, where'd he go?
朝食の支度もまだ行われておらず。
なんですって？
Uh-oh. Natsuki was indignant. To her, this was a much bigger problem than the phones not working. And despite that, this piece of information was the part that had been postponed. Why did everything go well most of the time and then come to something like this when the relatives were visiting? Natsuki put her hand to her forehead and shook her head.
大方朝寝坊でもしているのでしょう。とにかく誰でもいいから急いで朝食の準備を。
What? Natsuki exited into the hall and turned around for a second to close the door to her room. The creepy thing she saw there silenced her completely. It was an unpleasant sight, as though someone had dripped their fingers in a reddish black liquid and scratched at the door or around the doorknob. It was probably some sort of awful prank, arranged by some person who wanted to make it look as though they tried to force the door with bloody hands.
これは何のいたずらですか？
That's a good question.
悪趣味な。
私も今ここにお伺いして初めて気づきました。後ほど清掃いたします。
Did someone just die or something like that?
大方、趣味の悪い客人の冗談でしょう。不愉快です。実に不愉快です。
Who in the world would pull such a childish and disgusting prank? Natsuki had a pretty good idea, but of course there was no proof. So even if she pushed the issue, it would just seem as though she was making a fuss about nothing. In fact, it would surely be better to act as though she hadn't even realized that such a prank had been played on her. Natsuki gave the order to have it cleaned and headed off to the parlor with a squeak of her heels. When Natsuki and Genji arrived in the parlor, Eva and Hideyoshi were already there.
おはようございます、皆さん。
おはよう、夏日さん。朝食も合田さんが作るっちゅう話やないか。朝から胃袋が大喜びで騒ぎっぱなしなんや。
I wouldn't get excited if I were you. I don't want to ruin your mood or anything, but
本家の楽しみは食事くらいがせいぜいですものね。
エヴァさんも朝からご機嫌がよろしいようで何よりです。
with a wary expression, Natsuki returned Eva's gaze, which was fiercely competitive despite their early hour. Then Kanon jogged in. After bowing an apology to the relatives for running inside the mansion, he noticed Genji and told him something in a small voice.
カノン、ゴーダはまだ見つからないのですか？
申し訳ございません、奥様。お屋敷内もゲストハウスも回ったのですが、まだ。
Uh-oh.
一体どこへ行ったというのです？
I don't know.
とりあえず今はゴーダより朝食の準備が先決です。至急対応しなさい。
はい。
Excuse me. Kanon glanced at Genji. It seemed he had something else to report, but was uncertain whether or not the words should come from him. Genji nodded and decided to give the report himself.
奥様、ゴーダだけではありません。旦那様の姿もありません。
What? Oh shit. Goda and Kraus?
主人が？
はい。奥様より先に旦那様に朝食の準備がないことをご報告しようと思い、寝室をお伺いしたのですが、お姿がありませんでした。それから旦那様だけではありません。ルドルフ様ご夫妻とローザ様のお姿もありません。
Rudolph, Kyrie, and Rosa. 3, 4, 5. Well, shit.
ゲストハウスにも屋敷にもですか？
はい。ゲストハウスの部屋にもおられません。
When she'd heard that Goda alone was missing, she had assumed he had slept in or was loafing around somewhere. However, now that she'd learned that several of the relatives were also nowhere to be seen, she began to take a slightly more optimistic view. Could last night's family conference have continued all night up until the present moment? If so, they might have wanted to cool their heads after being shut in a stuffy room, going out for walks on their own through the rain. The part about cooling their heads really sounded like something Kraus would say. Goda had probably been summoned to accompany them and aid them in some way. Goda was not a man who lost track of time. He had to understand that preparations for breakfast would be hindered if he did not return. However, maybe the family conference had continued until this very moment, with an atmosphere that would make it hard for anyone to slip out. Yes, that theory would be quite convincing for Natsuki. She remembered the illusion she felt that morning, as though the previous night had never ended. When she learned that the feeling wasn't just an illusion, she once again took a deep, wary breath. After all, that banquet of filthy vultures circling Kinzo's property was still going on. Filthy vultures, oh man.
大方、庭園のどこか、あるいは海岸の方で相も変わらず遺産の話を繰り返しているのでしょう。とにかくゴーダを呼び戻さなくてはいつまでも朝食の準備が整いません。
ってことは何や？兄さんたちの話し合いはまだ続いとるんか？
I don't know. She had planned to say it in a small voice, but Hideyoshi overheard Natsuki and managed to grasp the situation.
兄さんもルドルフもタフね。ローザの場合は若さかしら？私たち、夕べの24時過ぎにはもう眠くてベッドに戻らせてもらったんだけど。確かにあの時点でも、まだ兄さんたちは熱論を交わしてたわ。
Jesus.
男って、熱くなると嫌ね。
Natsuki snorted, her face still blank.
カノン、表を探してらっしゃい。
Well, considering there's like red, darkish red stuff on the door from earlier, I don't think it's more than a freaking heated discussion. I don't know about that though.
ゴーダを見つけたらすぐに戻って朝食の準備をするよう伝えなさい。
かしこまりました。
I'm pretty sure we're gonna be late past breakfast at this point.
夏日姉さん、表とは限らないわよ。お父様の書斎ってことはないかしら？
なるほど。考えられん話やないで。どういう話の流れかはわからんが、お父さんの主催に場所を移してお父さんにも混じってもらって議論を続けてるっちゅう可能性は十分あるやろ。
そのような汚らわしい話題を好んでお父様が書斎へ招き入れることなど考えられません。
あらそう。じゃあ仕方ないわね。源氏さんとカノン君は申し訳ないけど外を探してきてちょうだい。 確かに兄さんなら頭を冷やすために外を散歩しようなんて言い出しても不思議はないわ。たとえこんな天気でもね。私はお父様の書斎に行ってくるわ。ひょっとするとそこにいるかもしれないしね。
客人であるエヴァさんにそこまでのご足労はおかけできません。私が行ってきます。朝のご挨拶も兼ねて。
あら、じゃあお願いするわね。でも朝の挨拶を交わしてくれるかは疑わしいわね。夏日姉さんってお父様とは仲よろしかったかしら？
仲が良いかは分かりかねますが、後宮家の跡継ぎの妻を許されるだけの信頼を得ていると確信しています。
ならきっと返事くらいはしてくれるわね。お父様とは朝食くらいご一緒したいの。ぜひ降りてきてくださるよう説得してくれないかしら？私たちはすっかり嫌われちゃってるみたいだけど、そこまで信頼を得ている夏日姉さんの言うことなら聞いてくれそうですもの。そこまで啖呵を切ってお父様を説得できず一人で降りてきちゃったりしたら、信頼を得ているなんて二度と言えないかもね。
Ah, damn. Eva just straight up just roasting her.
自信はありませんが、努力はします。
Natsuki responded, looking discouraged. However, knowing Kinzo's temperament, she had absolutely no confidence in her ability to bring him out. Eva was clearly mocking her, confident that Natsuki wouldn't be able to get Kinzo to come down. But even so, Natsuki would lose face if she gave up, saying it was impossible and letting Eva go instead. Eva's mean-spirited and unreasonable demand made Natsuki clench her fists slightly. When Genji realized this, he softly spoke to her over her shoulder.
奥様、よろしければこれをお持ちください。
それは？
Genji handed Natsuki a sparkling gold key of ornate design. It was the key to Kinzo's study. The study had an auto lock and couldn't be unlocked as long as Kinzo forbade entrance. However, since Genji was especially trusted by Kinzo, he was allowed to carry a key to that door.
でもこの鍵を使ったら、あなたも咎めを受けるのではありませんか？
That's true. Considering that Genji is the most trusted by Kinzo.
親方様は深くお休みになられている時、扉を叩くくらいではお耳に届かないこともございます。それに親方様にお部屋を出ていただくよう説得するには扉越しでは難しゅうございましょう。ぜひお使いください。
源氏。
Until now, Natsuki had thought of Genji as a cold servant who wouldn't do anything for her, since he worked directly under Kinzo. But it looked like she would have to alter her understanding of him. She wanted to communicate her gratitude but by then, Genji had already turned his back on her and was walking down the corridor with Kannon. But as Natsuki watched him go, the words directed at her from behind were sneering.
じゃあお父様を必ず連れてきてね。息子のかわいい嫁の言うことですもの。きっと聞いてくれるわよ。
Oh, I wouldn't laugh about that, though.
私たちは客人だから、ここでのんびりくつろがせてもらうわ。
Yeah, you can go have fun with that.
予算買えば口が過ぎるで。すまんが夏日姉さん、お父さんのことよろしく頼むわ。
Without answering, Natsuki forcefully spun around on her heels and quickly left that place. After all that excitement the previous night, there was no way anyone was going to wake up early. George Aniki, Jessica, and I were snoring loudly on the beds in their cousin's room. But Maria, who had gone straight to bed without joining in, was completely awake. As she rubbed her sleepy eyes and looked around, she was met with the loud snoring of the other three cousins. For a while, Maria had to think about what had happened. After that, she realized that her mother wasn't with her, and she quickly got lonely. Maria left the cousin's room, trying to head to the room that had been arranged for her and her mother. Paying no heed to the three who were sleeping soundly, she slammed the door shut. In response, Battler mumbled and rolled over in sleep, but it wasn't enough to wake him up. After a while, Maria returned once again, opening the door with a lively bang. Uh-oh. Doesn't sound like good news. When she had left the room, her face had been sleepy, but now that she was back, she looked irritated. After that, she climbed up on Battler's bed, which happened to be the closest, and started yelling and jumping on it like it was a trap. Oh my god. And started yelling and jumping on it like it was a trampoline. Oh fuck. I forgot the controller was connected was why that happened. God damn it. Pluck that out. There we go. I think what happened was like I was playing some Hollow Cure a while back, and I was playing it with the controller, so that happened. I still had the controller on. Anyway, Maria is just jumping on Battler like a trampoline. I'm pretty sure there's a way to turn that off, right? When it comes to like a controller and shit. Let's see, no. Rumble strength. Oh. I guess we'll just... I don't know what that means, but rumble strength could mean the controller, so I'll just turn that down just like that. Oh, I guess by the, judging by the game, so... I don't know, man. I'll just put it right here, I guess? I don't know. I am assuming the rumble strength had to do with the during the game and not the controller. So. An enemy raid? Oh shit. After making sure I was awake, Maria moved over to George Aniki's bed and started jumping on that too. In that manner, the three of us were all greeted with an extremely pleasant awakening.
ありがとう、マリアちゃん。起こしてくれたんだね。僕たちは夕べが遅かったから寝坊しちゃったのを起こしてくれたんだね。でももう少しだけ起こし方を優しくしてくれると完璧だったかな。
ジョージ兄さんは本当に大人だよ。尊敬するぜ。
もうすぐ7時なんだな。ま、確かにもう起きてもいい頃だぜ。
What a way to yawn with a lip sync.
ローザおばさんが部屋にいなかったの？もう起きてお屋敷の方に行っちゃったのかな。
Maria kept groaning, and looking unhappy. She didn't exactly seem lonely because her mother wasn't around. It was more like she was irritated and thrown off balance because her mother wasn't where she'd expected. Oh no. Considering that the five are missing and Rosa is one of them. If we could just tell her where her mother was, that alone would probably calm her down. But unfortunately, we had no way of knowing where Aunt Rosa was, except that she wasn't here.
どうせ朝食に行くことになるんだし、屋敷の方に行こうぜ。
そうだな。マリア、一緒に屋敷へ行こうぜ。きっとローザおばさんもそこさ。
おお、ママはお屋敷なら行く。おお。
そうだね。お屋敷に行こうか。多分親たちはもう向こうに行ってるんだよ。
Maria regained her usual composure so completely. Her earlier tantrum now seemed like a lie. We got dressed, left the room, and headed for the mansion. Let's see. We're around 49 minutes in. I think now is a good time to save it right here. We'll pick it off for the next part. So, like, comment, subscribe. Oh man, we are in like day 2, and this is where probably where all some bad things happen. So, we'll see. Have a good one.